was really critical for us to understand the flatness. But at the end of the day, it's about finding what your needs are, what your requirements are, and then finding the laser scanner that was within that tolerance, within that accuracy. They're put in place so that ducts and pipes can run through them rather than running under them. Building in the locations that was coordinated with Omicron. Concrete core and a steel structure. There was no way for us to check the floor flatness under so much material. And behind the material and in front of the material, reducing rework, saving the client fees, deliver on time. Hello again, everyone. My name is Halena Gubru. I work as a VDC Specialist at Omicron. We are an integrated design, construction, and development firm located in Vancouver and Victoria, British Columbia. Today I'll be presenting a case study on leveraging reality capture on a complex tenant improvement project. So on our agenda today, we'll be looking at some background project information, what exactly our goals were when we decided to leverage reality capture, the processes and workflows that were applied. We'll look at some of the challenges that we encountered, the key performance indicators that we identified to measure the success of the processes that were applied, and then we'll look at the advantages. So, some background information. We were engaged by the client to be the prime consultant and architect of record, as well as provide construction management and BIM services. The project is a 24-story building under construction in Vancouver, with our client occupying 9 stories and 120,000 square feet for their office headquarters. What makes this project really unique is that it's composed of a system of 4-story cubes, as you can see here, that is stacked around a central concrete core and a steel structure that was raised and fixed into place. In addition to providing construction documentation, tendering, permitting, CA, and project closeout services, we're also providing some technology services such as laser scanning, clash detection, 360 photography, virtual reality, as well as one-stop construction management dashboard that gives our team insights into tracking construction management metrics so that they're always on top of things. So jumping into our goals, at Omicron, we always kick off the beginning of the year with setting digital transformation goals or digital strategies. And this year, one of our biggest goals was to move from a reactive culture to a proactive culture, and then one day to a predictive culture. As I'm sure most of you are familiar with, in the construction industry, we traditionally we get things once it's in the past. It's very much a post-factor analysis. So we started laying out processes that would help us approach construction in a more proactive manner and a predictive manner, so that rather than firefighting, we have early warnings and early indicators to mitigate risks and issues. With that said, one of the things that we identified as a pillar that will move us to a proactive and predictive culture was reality capture. So there's so many possibilities of how you decide to leverage and make use of a point cloud, but the intention with this specific project was to use it to analyze floor flatness, to confirm our floor to ceiling height clearances, to use the point cloud to perform clash detection with our design models, to analyze the electrical and mechanical model with the point cloud to check for clashes that may occur during installation. Things like checking the location of HVAC units, fan coil units, ERVs, and whether they were installed by base building in the locations that was coordinated with Omicron. With that said, I'll jump into our processes and workflows that we used. So late last year, we purchased our first laser scanner, which was the Leica BLK360. Previously, we used to hire external consultants to perform laser scans and produce point clouds for us. But for efficiency reasons, convenience, and cost savings, we decided to perform them in-house. And the BLK was compact, lightweight, costs a third or a fourth of what the other big boys cost, and so we thought it was the perfect thing to get started with. I know it's not the most accurate laser scanner out there in comparison to the bigger and more expensive ones, but at the end of the day, it's about finding what your needs are, what your requirements are, and then finding the laser scanner that was within that tolerance, within that accuracy. And the BLK360 was accurate enough for us because it has an accuracy between 6 to 8 millimeters or 10 millimeters of accuracy, which was good enough for us. We mainly export E57 and RCP files, structured, of course, because it gives us that panoramic image that our stakeholders seem to really love. And after some testing, we decided to scan using medium resolution and HDR photos. So to kick off this process, we developed a scan plan where we use Autodesk's PlanGrid to mark the spots for each of the scan station. PlanGrid was really beneficial here because while scanning, I could dynamically move around and edit my stations within the scan plan when there would either be too much material that I couldn't set up in the areas that I had pre-planned on setting up. And on the next slide, you'll see why it was really helpful to have a scan plan during the registration process when I'm working with 70 scans on a single floor, especially on a project like this where every single section looks identical to one another. Play you a little video. So once we finished scanning, it was time to register the point cloud using Cyclone Register 360, and this is where we were able to pull in that scan plan and drop each of the scans on the corresponding locations that were pre-planned, which made the process a lot easier and faster for us. These are the bubble views that our stakeholders love so much. And then from here, we export our RCP files and use that for clash detection, floor flatness analysis, height clearances, and so on. So let's look at some of the things that we ended up using the point cloud for. First off is floor flatness. Due to the high-end finishes and millwork that was going to be installed by our construction team, it was really critical for us to understand the flatness of the base building slabs prior to planning our work. We used a software called Rhythm to evaluate the floor flatness. Shout out to ClearEdge. I know you guys are here today. Rhythm is a great tool to use for floor flatness or floor levelness if you haven't used it before. But I want to mention the reason you don't see a smooth transition between each of those petals when you're looking at the heat map is because we assessed each petal relative to itself. And that's because a petal is what we call each one of those cubes. I don't know, maybe it's because it looks like a flower that we call them petals. But as you can see, the results looked really crazy, but it saved us a lot of money because had we not evaluated ahead of time before the tenant improvement handover, we would have been stuck with the cost of leveling it, right? And so because this was our first time using this method of analysis, I can't tell you how great it felt when we had our flooring trades come in, use the traditional method with the straight edge, check the unevenness, and then validate that we were right, which, you know, saves the trades a lot of headache of not having to check 120,000 square feet manually. The next thing we checked was height to ceiling clearances. The client required a clearance of 9 feet from floor to ceiling because the tenant improvement included installing mechanical equipment, lighting, audio, visual, and interior design elements that would drop way too low if there wasn't a 9 feet clearance. We used Revizto for this process. Revizto is the collaboration tool that we used on this project to track, coordinate, and solve our issues. It's a great tool to navigate in for your BIM models or point clouds. And this is a merged view of the mechanical model and the point cloud. As you can see here, the clearance shows less than 9 feet. It's about 7 feet something. So that way we also don't have to walk around site and manually check the clearances with a tape measure, right? We can just dynamically do this in Revizto. So shout out to you guys. I keep giving free promo here. So moving on to clash detection, our main goal in performing clash detection was reducing our change orders, reducing rework, saving the client fees, and deliver on time. As most of you already know, clash detection is the merging of either 2 BIM models or a BIM model and a point cloud, say architectural and structural or architectural and mechanical, and using a software like Navisworks to check for any clashes. That process ended up turning into 16 different iterations of clash detection because of how many models we had. So we turned that into a report, pushed it to Revizto, and worked with each consultant to either redesign or adjust some services. However, everyone in this room knows that the as-built conditions don't really end up matching with construction drawings. Is it safe to say that? How many people agree with me? So even though we had done our due diligence and we had run clash detections between the BIM models, that doesn't mean that the base building trades installed it exactly according to the construction drawings. And so that's when reality capture comes in, because now we can perform a laser scan to develop the as-built conditions, merge that with the model, and then ran a clash detective. And from there, we'd be able to see our problem areas like you can see here, and work with our consultants to see if we need to redesign or not. As you can see, what that is it's a beam. I think that was taken a little too closely, but that's a beam, and the holes that you see there, they're called castellations, and they're put in place so that ducts and pipes can run through them rather than running under them. And most of our castellations ended up being occupied by base building services, even though our model shows that the tenant improvement mechanical services was to go through it. So rather than, having trades out there issuing RFI after RFI, we catch the clashes ahead of time and then just redesign. Here is another case. I can show you hundreds of these where there's base building services had occupied a lot of the ceiling space that was required by our mechanical design. But we mainly focused on high impact clashes like fan coil unit locations, where there were high-end interior design finishes and millwork that needed to be installed. But otherwise, certain number of clashes are just solved on site by our trades. But things like fan coil locations were resolved in advance due to the scale of the expected cost and impact on the schedule, had we waited to do it on the field. But by proactively solving those clashes ahead of time, we're not only avoiding a high cost and fees down the line that could be avoided, but we're also making sure that the project schedule isn't affected by unforeseen conditions that would affect our quality of work and also affect our handover to the client. I would say that this is one of the most valuable things for our team, our trades, our sub-consultants, but most importantly, the client, of course, because they're able to leverage the representation of the as-built conditions so that we can work through thousands of clashes. Moving on to our challenges, I want to talk a little about the challenges that we encountered. I'll play you a short video.
It's every developer's goal to minimize the floor-to-floor height in a building, and it's every tenant's objective to maximize that floor-to-ceiling space that they're inevitably going to be living in. One of the challenges on site for our trades is they find a clash or a conflict, and inevitably their workflow comes to a standstill, and they need to consult with the architects and engineers to come up with solutions to those conflicts.
So any new workflow you're going to implement is going to have some challenges, right? And so even though there wasn't a lot with laser scanning, the job site being one with active construction, the amount of materials that were on site did affect the workflow a little bit. And one of the issues related to that was that when we're assessing floor flatness, there was no way for us to check the floor flatness under so much material, right? And sometimes this would be a feet or 2 feet, sometimes it would be 10 feet, as you can see. And another issue is now we have to scan behind the material and in front of the material because there was a lot of stuff that was obscuring the view of the laser scanner. And then there was also a lot of workers that would just freely walk around our laser scanners and cover it, and they don't understand that you have to rerun it, and it takes 6 minutes per station, and so there was that. And then also, when you have a lot of material and people in your point clouds, that means that you have to manually close a lot of clashes that aren't really clashes, but just people and material instead. And then lastly, just like any other new software or hardware that you implement, there's a learning curve to it, right? You'd think you can go buy a laser scanner, do 5 to 6 hours of training, watch YouTube videos, and get it done. That is not how it works. I learned the hard way. So, that ends up lengthening your delivery time, right? Because I don't have the same experience as some of you here who've done it for like over a decade. So there's definitely a learning curve there, I would say. Before we kicked off this workflow, we wanted to set some KPIs that were measurable and then record those results so that we had measurable points of how much and where exactly the benefits were to this process. And so we identified RFIs, or request for informations, and the turnaround time of RFIs compared to other projects with similar scope and size, the amount of change orders that were issued, the rework that was required, the schedule impact of that rework, and then finally the additional cost to the client. Wrapping up with the advantages that were gained while leveraging laser scanning on this project. The point cloud strategy provided the construction team as-built validation and confidence that the evolving design was taking preconditions into account, revealing design conflicts before they were apparent on site. And making design changes accordingly, not only assuming that the issue associated with delays, costs, and inefficiencies are avoided, but also assures that we're taking positive steps towards a better communication platform between the design and the construction team while eliminating waste and creating an effective and collaborative team dynamic. With that, we were able to reduce change orders, reduce rework, because so many of the clashes were caught ahead of time before our trades even began installing a lot of the services. And we were also able to maintain our schedule and not have to push it back due to unforeseen events. We were able to also reduce a lot of the risk where the outcomes were unknown. The turnaround time for RFIs lowered because our team had 24/7 access to site conditions and other information that they wouldn't have access to if we didn't have a point cloud. And then finally, I'm going to play you a video of my colleague that I snuck in as she was doing a virtual walkthrough, which essentially just lowers the amount of time that we need to go to site to validate certain things. Thank you very much. Thank you to the RCN team for letting me speak today.